Welcome to the Feisty Women's Performance Podcast. I'm your host, Sara Gross, Ironman champion, PhD in women's history, and founder and CEO of Feisty Media. I started this show because I wanted to cut through the BS of diet culture and fitness culture and actually learn from high-achieving women at the top of their game who have figured out how to feel and perform their best at every stage of life. So I chat with experts, elite athletes, and leaders who have learned to succeed despite the massive gender data gap in exercise and medical science and product development. Every episode is filled with information, advice, and anecdotes that will help you fulfill your potential as an athlete, mom, leader, or business owner. And listen up. If you don't subscribe to our Women's Performance newsletter, you are definitely missing out. It's totally free. So head over to womensperformance.com and subscribe now. That's womensperformance.com. This podcast is a production of Feisty Media. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, Feisty friends, wherever you are listening. Welcome to the Women's Performance Podcast. I know I get really excited about all the people I get to talk to through podcasting, and I genuinely love learning from every single one of them. But I have to tell you, this week's interview stands as my favorite ever. My guest today, Jill Colangelo, is a former triathlete and ultra runner who researches the often delicate relationship between mental health and participation in endurance sports. She is currently a research affiliate at the Department of Forensic Psychiatry at the University of Bern, and also writes mental health focused articles for Triathlete magazine and also across outside media. I welcomed Jill into my virtual studio, and it was like chatting with an old friend. Jill and I dove into the work she does as she researches the intersection between mental health and sport. Her master's thesis was published in a Harvard review and looked at the prevalence of anxiety, depression, and addictive behaviors in endurance communities. She had some surprising findings, like on average, mental health tends to decline at higher training volumes. And also, we don't really know whether endurance training causes mental health challenges or if folks with mental health challenges are more likely to be endurance athletes. Since Jill and I have both been endurance junkies ourselves, we discuss some of the negative outcomes that can occur when we put endurance sports and athletes on too high a pedestal. At the end of the day, people go through a lot worse than running a marathon, and we have to ask, who are the true heroes? I found Jill's insights about her own journey as well as the research that she does to be extremely helpful and relatable, and I think we can all learn from her wisdom. Jill, good morning. Good afternoon. You're all the way over in Italy.
I am. Hi, Sarah. Good morning to you.
Yeah, it's so good to speak to you. We talked for a while there before the show started. So I thought let's press record because you're saying some great stuff. Tell us a little bit first about like your sports background. Like, did you play sports as a kid?
I did. Yeah. So way back, like neighborhood softball team, that kind of stuff. I always liked sports. And aside from sports, I was always that kid that was like trying to find trails and getting muddy and, on my bike and just getting into mischief back in the day where we could leave and no one knew where we were back then. That was me always.
Or when they didn't want to know where we were.
Exactly. They come home, before dinner kind of thing. And, I just loved getting out into the trees. I don't know why. I loved it so much. So I always kind of had that mindset of just, I guess, physical activity, movement or whatever. So field hockey, soccer, lacrosse, all that stuff in high school. I played soccer for 1 year in college. And then I was like, no. And then I didn't actually go back to anything that I would consider sort of organized until, I think I was in my first graduate school program. So that was way back in 98, 99. And I started running and running became somewhere along the way became triathlons, and then triathlons became ultramarathons. And then, that's it either goes one to the other, or, either start a triathlon and end up at ultras or go backwards, so that was my kind of trajectory there. And yeah, so that's kind of how it all came together.
Yeah, the obsession with getting longer and longer distances is, I think a lot of people relate to that, right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, you do first you do a 5K, then a 10K. Like where else you go but longer, right?
Yes. And this is a perfect time for me to like just stress that like everything we're about to talk about, research is me search. I always say so. I am the poster child for everything we're going to talk about. I was that person
Right.
who's like, and what happens if I do a little more? And what
Yeah.
happens if I do this? Yeah. So completely 100%. I am that exact personality type. So yes.
Well, and I think I wish more people would own that almost. Like, is I think research in a way should be me search. Like, there's nothing better than like actually researching the things that make you like that are you're passionate about in life. Right. And that's
Yeah.
like that's kind of from what I understand, like how you found your way into your own research.
Yes, 100%. So I am, I'm the N of one. It's all started with me. I kind of laugh about it now, but it was really kind of serious and scary. In about 2015, I was living in California. And by the way, this is like a side note. If you are struggling with your relationship with sport, probably don't move into the hornet's nest. So I
Right.
moved, yeah, I moved directly to the Bay Area right when I was like struggling the most with wanting to run all the time. And completely blew my brains out up and down from like, just the whole area. And I was really running so much. I was doing really ridiculous things, training for events, but training way too much. Just kind of working 9 to 5 during the week, and then just spending all my time on the trails. I lived in Woodside. If anyone knows where that is, it's like you're in the middle of like 3 parks, and I mean, you could just find endless trails to connect you all the way up and down the coast. So I just did that. I just did that nonstop. I did races. I just ran and ran and ran. And I was really starting to feel some massive symptoms, things like that were very scary, like night sweats that were really jarring, soaking the entire bed, having to get up, change the sheets, that kind of thing. My legs were starting to feel really dead and heavy. I could, let's say if one, I was normally used to running, let's say like a 20 or 25-mile training run. I found myself unable to do anything more than like 5 miles. It was like just
Mm.
pain in my legs and just so many different symptoms. And I was really scared. So, I didn't really know what was going on. And of course, probably like many people relate, I went to doctors. No one had any idea. Anyway, this kind of led me to want to research this more. And I really was like, oh man, I want to go back to school and study this. And my initial thought was, do I want to go to medical school? Like, is this a medical thing? Like, what's happening?
Right.
Um, and even though it had medical sort of ramifications, I started to realize that like this only happens because of a decision-making process. And that decision-making process is informed by my psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a wake-up call. So I started to kind of study psychology. I went back to school, blah, blah, blah. And so now I'm just like a nerd who studies this all the time, because it's really important. And the more people I talk to, the more I realize there's such a huge lack of information about this. And I really want to contribute to that discourse a lot. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's super relatable. I'm wondering, just like to unpack that a little bit, like when you say you were doing ridiculous things, what does that actually look like? Like what was ridiculous for you?
yeah, for me, ridiculous was doing, let's say, and I sort of hate to use numbers because I don't want to give people incentive, but
Right.
even my, let's say I was running like back-to-back marathons on a weekend, just
Mhm.
because, Saturday, Sunday, just like either 20 and 25 miles or like 20 and 22 or 25 and 25, just doing this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
Or, just getting up at, let's say, 4 o'clock in the morning to run like 15 miles before work, which is fine. But if you do that like once, but we'll talk about maybe reasons why that's not such a good idea to skip your sleep to do that.
Mhm.
And just running a huge amount of mileage, which was way overdoing it for the kind of, I mean, I was an average ultra runner, right? I wasn't a pro. I wasn't on podiums. I just was really obsessed with it. And so I got this massive wake up call when people have probably heard me tell this story before. I went on it was like Chrissy Mail I think she just wrote her book about training for ultramarathon, or it was one of those like kind of, meet and greet things at like a Patagonia store near Stanford. I'll never forget this. And she did like a group run ahead of time, and we were talking, and she was telling me about her like weekly mileage, and she was running like in the 50s for weekly mileage. And I was like,
And that
oh,
sounded really low to you?
oh goodness, yes. I was running way more than that. And I was like, oh, and then I don't know. It's like I had this moment, and I don't know if this has ever happened to you before, but it's like you hear something, you kind of get the idea that it's important, but you don't really like process it yet. And you're like,
Right.
I think this is going to become important at some point in the future.
Right.
Exactly what happened. So it later on, I filed it away, and I played it over in my mind over and over again, like since then. And, I think at the time I was running like 80 miles a week or something, which doesn't seem like a lot, I think, in the ultra community. But for me, who I was at the time, I had no business running that kind of mileage,
Well, and for someone who's working as well, you know what I mean? Like that's a lot to recover from.
For
right?
sure. For sure. Yeah. And also I'm celiac. So, at the time, I really thought that I was like replacing my carbohydrates appropriately. And I really wasn't. I thought that I was, but I just was not, it wasn't enough. Whatever I was doing was nowhere near enough. In fact, that's one of the things that I wish I knew then, is how much more food you actually need to eat than what you think.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I'm also celiac. And I relate to that a lot. Like that feeling of like not understanding why the fuel doesn't seem to be like working, quote unquote, the way it does for other people. And I knew for so long something's up, but I didn't know what.
Yes. And I should have known better. I got diagnosed when I was 25. So I should have known better, but I just didn't really update my intake to work for the amount of mileage I was running and the volume. Yeah.
Right. So you're one of like, I think, I don't know, I'd love to know what you think about this, but I think it's a rare person who actually ends up overtrained. There's a lot of fear mongering around doing too much, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that there is like a rare kind of personality type who can push themselves so far that they get to that place where you were just talking about, having the night sweats or like actually having physical symptoms of overtraining. That's just my observation from coaching and being an elite athlete. Do you find that to be true too?
I do. And the reason why I will say that is because, so I do like mentoring calls with athletes who feel like they're kind of going through this. And I've talked to so many people over the years. I've been doing it for years. And it is very true that everyone I talk to has, their relationship to the sport has gone beyond training at that point. And they are kind of using this sport to do something. And again, I will totally self-own on that as well. For sure, I was doing that. I was definitely using my training to manage stuff that I struggled with,
Oh, I see. So by to do something, you mean manage something else in your life.
Exactly.
Right. Okay.
Exactly.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that the type of person who can get overtrained has like a perfect storm of very high stress in different areas of their lives, because this is ultimately an overload of stress, which creates overtraining syndrome. So a person who has a lot of stress coming from a lot of different areas, and they are able to override some real serious somatic, so meaning like information coming from your body that's telling you, ouch, this hurts, I need to stop, I'm hungry, I'm tired, all that stuff. So they're able to override that stuff. And they're able to kind of have a purpose for their training that is more important to them, I think, than kind of all the other stuff. So it's more important than those stresses. It's more important than rest. It's more important than a lot of different things. Some people just really need to achieve that goal, even if it's like, I will run 20 miles today. They will just need to achieve that goal for many different reasons. And so, yes, I do think that I used to, maybe this will make you laugh. So when I was first with my husband, now back in the day, he was my boyfriend, and I kind of got him into ultras a little bit. And he is Italian, so he's very much not all the time, but he does have a little bit of like vein of Dolce Vita in there, right? So he would be running and he'd be like, I'm tired, I want to stop. And I would be like, whoa. like, yeah, well, we have to run 20 today because, you know, you have a 50K next weekend. And he'd be like, no, I'm tired. And I would be like, well, you don't understand. Like today, the calendar says we have to run 20.
Right.
Right. And I would scoff at him and I would be like, you're a self-preservationist. Right. My like,
with that level
to him.
Yeah.
Right? Self-preservationist. And it's so funny because that like kind of pejorative term, right? I launched at him. I don't think I ever said it to him, but I would like think it, you know?
Yeah.
That is what people need to be. You do need to be self-preservation.
Right. You need a little bit of that. Yeah.
Yes, you absolutely do. So I think that like, you know, I just didn't have any of that at the time. And I think a lot of people don't have it. So that's where we end up here.
As a lifelong runner and triathlete turned CrossFitter, I am stoked to announce that the athletic eyewear brand Tifosi Optics has joined us as a partner here at Feisty Media. Tifosi sports glasses hit all the marks for athletes. They're shatterproof polybicarbonate, so the lenses not only reduce glare, but also offer scratch resistance, which I 100% need. They stay in place when you are moving. The hydrophilic rubber nose pads actually get more grippy the more you sweat, so they are secure and don't slide down your face even when you're running in hot conditions. No matter what sport you do, Tifosi has shades for you. Whether you love tennis, fishing, pickleball, running, cycling, or just hanging out on the beach. They are super reasonably priced, which I love, so I can have multiple pairs that go with any outfit. And of course, Feisty listeners get a special discount. So head on over to tifosioptics.com and use the code FM20. FM as in Feisty Media to get 20% off your order. That's FM20 at tifosioptics.com. I'll put a link in the show notes to make it easy for you. Building muscle can be tough, and gains can be so slow, even for those of us who do a lot of strength training. As an ex-endurance athlete who is now in perimenopause, I know this all too well. It can be frustrating to put in the time in the gym and not see the results I'm looking for. That's why it's super important to take the right supplements at the right time. One of those supplements is essential amino acids, which are needed to trigger muscle protein synthesis. Muscle protein synthesis happens when you eat high-quality protein, like eggs or whey. And by supplementing with additional essential amino acids, you can make sure you are getting the full benefit of your training sessions. Targeted essential amino acid formulas can be up to 4 times more effective than just eating protein. I've been taking amino acids for almost a year, and in combination with eating quality protein and a couple other supplements, I have managed to turn the tides on age-related muscle loss, which starts at 30 for women, by the way, and I have continued to make strength gains as I head towards 50. AminoCo has been a long-time sponsor of Feisty Media and has supported all of our brands and podcasts over the years. I recommend starting with AminoCo Perform, and you can grab some at aminoco.com/performance. If you enter the code PERFORMANCE, you will save 30% and receive a free gift if it is your first purchase. Give it a try and let me know how it goes. That's aminoco.com/performance and use the code PERFORMANCE to save 30%. Endurance sports should be accessible to everyone, right? That's why we are so excited to be partnering with Motive. Motive is one of the fastest growing training apps in the world today, with thousands of amateur athletes signing up every month and a nearly perfect 4.9 star rating in the App Store. You are not a template, and your training plan should not be either. Prepare for running races, triathlons, cycling events, duathlons, or swim runs, however your season schedule shapes up, and get training written by some of the best coaches in the world in each discipline who know what it takes to help amateur athletes reach their goal on race day. The app takes the training written by those experts and then creates the most optimal training plan for your schedule, abilities, and goals. Plus, the training is fully customized to your race schedule. how much you can train each week, your current abilities, and the goals you want to achieve in your race. You can use the app for free as long as you want, or get all the upgraded features from the app for just $19.99 a month. But as a Feisty listener, you can sign up at mymotive.com and use the code Feisty for 2 months of full premium access. That's right, you get 2 months of premium for free. So you quite literally have nothing to lose. So head over to mymotive.com, mymotiv.com, and use the code Feisty, Feisty. And on a personal note, I know the founder of Motive, and he is driven to make triathlon and all endurance sports more accessible for the athletes who care about their performance, but who aren't quite ready for a full-time personal coach. If that sounds like you, definitely try the app for 2 months for free. You literally have nothing to lose. Right, I see. So yeah, so then you ended up realizing, I mean, wisely really, that like what you were struggling with, while it did have a physiological effect and medical issues attached to it, probably was rooted in some kind of psychology. So off you went to study psychology, and I did read part of your master's thesis. What did you find out originally in that study about like the prevalence of like anxiety and depression and addictive behaviors in the endurance community? Because I think that a lot of people hearing that might think, oh, that's super relatable, or I know people, or, like our endurance community, we kind of know that people become, like we've been talking about already, a little bit obsessive about sport. So what did you find?
Yeah, so I kind of naively went into this going like, well, this makes sense. Look at all this research that makes this like, I think this is a very reasonable hypothesis. And everybody around me was like, what? What do you mean that there's like mental health issues in sport and in ultra endurance sport? Like sports is what makes you happy and exercise makes you happy and all this stuff. And I just wanted to study it anyway. So I surveyed, I actually did the study twice. The one that is published is the second round, and there were 700 amazing ultra endurance athletes from all over the world and from all different disciplines who contributed to the study, and they answered questions based on their mental health history. And they did 2 questionnaires to ask them to assess risk for different mental disorder. And by the way, that word disorder is kind of strong, but that's just how the language is in the literature, right? And then I gave them, so just I wanted to ask them about sort of their history and their experience and how much they trained. So I was hoping to find, I mean, it sounds sort of weird to say, I was hoping to find that there was more mental illness in this population, but that is not what anybody wants.
Oh,
but I was hoping to have my hypothesis proved to be true, which it was, which was there was a higher prevalence of mental illness in this population of ultra endurance athletes than in the general population. And then I didn't even plan on doing this, but I broke the data down by hours per week of training. So it was like under 10, 10 to 20, and 20. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, we saw a dose response. There was a dose response. So the more physical activity you were doing in a week, the more likely you were to have a mental disorder.
Right. Interesting. And then you have I guess you probably would have a chicken and egg question there.
Yes.
Yeah, right. Sorry, yes. Continue.
No, that's great. Everyone asked that question. It was so smart, because that is one of the things that I'm trying to look at isolating now. There's evidence to suggest that it's both, it's either or both. There's evidence to suggest there's certain types of people that gravitate more toward this type of physical activity because it fulfills a need, as we said. There's also evidence to suggest that these like neurotransmitters that we get after this type of physical activity are like a natural opioid, so they may have an effect. There's research to suggest that there could have more of an effect than we think. There's evidence for both. There's evidence that some of these types of behaviors, whether they are habits, or maybe there's something about those neurotransmitters, can also create kind of an addiction situation. So there's a lot of stuff to study with this. I'm very keen to kind of hone in on that exact chicken and egg question. It's something I'm working on now.
Yeah, I'm just sorry. I'm furiously taking notes.
Oh,
Because that's it. If I look down, that's
yeah,
that's what I'm
no
doing. Like,
problem. Yeah.
because I'm thinking about all of the times that we hear in endurance communities, in triathlon, in Ironman racing in particular, that we're A-type personalities, right? Like people who tend to want to achieve things or like to have that busy schedule. And then I'm thinking about myself and how I definitely feel some of those things, like that sport provides like a mood enhancement for me, right? And that there is a bit of an addictive quality to that because my day won't be as good without that. I won't feel as happy, right?
Yes.
So I think my question is like, at what point, like how do you draw the line between when it's healthy and unhealthy?
Yeah, that is such a good question too. So it's going to be different for everyone, but maybe I can set it up this way. So we think right now our culture is convinced that there is an unending positive effect of physical activity on our physical
Right,
and
like you can't do too much. Like
right.
yeah, right,
We
which
just
clearly
think
is
that
not
there's
true. Yeah.
yeah, we're just like forever and always amen. The graph, the chart just goes straight up, right?
Yeah.
But if that were true, then those people in my study who were at the top end of physical activity, they would all be like Buddha, right? They would be like psyched. They would be super happy all the time. They would be like, oh, life is so good. It's like I'm running so much, everything's great. But that's not the case. So we accept I talk about this all the time. We accept a U-shaped curve. Our relationship is a U-shaped curve with sport, right? We accept that for everything else in our lives. We're like, oh, okay. If I'm thirsty, I drink water. If I drink too much, I become hyponatremic, right? Athletes know that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But we don't accept that for physical activity. We're like, well, I don't understand. I just, in my case, ran double marathons over the weekend. Why do I feel bad? Um, and so there's going to be a place, there's going to be a point in that curve at the top where you're getting the maximum mental health benefit and the maximum physical health benefit. But then after a certain point, it's going to drop off because after a certain point, that physical activity is going to become another stress on the body and the mind, and the wheels are going to fall off at some point, and that point is going to be vastly different for everyone, which I think causes the most amount of confusion because we are a society that thrives in comparison, right? So we're like, oh, well, what's that person doing? What's that person doing? And how come she can run that much and she didn't lose her period? And what about that guy? How come, he can run 150 miles a week and I can't? So that kind of thing is normal for our community. But the truth is that it doesn't matter where the point is, there's going to be the point, guaranteed. It just depends on, it's going to be in a different spot for everybody.
Right. I've been thinking about this a lot because I've transitioned from being a full-time pro athlete where I'm doing exercise as a means to an end. I make a living that way, that focused completely on training and recovery, to like, how does exercise fit into my life as a working person who's running a business, who has a daughter, etc. Right. Which is more like, the average person. Right. Um,
I cannot see you as an average, like even
oh.
even in that context, Sarah, like no, but okay, nice try. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You're sort of average, right? Yeah.
I'm average.
Yeah.
But like, I thought a bit about, so for a while there, I went to CrossFit just as like my daily hit. And then I sort of realized this is my N equals one, and then I'm gonna let you respond. But like that, like actually I feel better if I'm in the process of getting fitter, right? Instead of just like showing up every day and doing and exercising. And so I was like, oh, okay, how about I try to set some goals and I try to get fitter in certain areas, right? And then I'm like, oh, this is a slippery slope, because like you can't get fitter and fitter forever, right? So you have to plan it. I'm like, oh, at some point I'm gonna have to plan like actually detraining, like in order to be training again, right? Like it was just I was like, oh, and I felt like I was having this kind of like original thought or something, like because like previously in my life I think I had just assumed that we get fitter and fitter to infinity. Right? And that's not real, right? Like I was like, it's my own mental check of like, how do we healthfully fit in having endurance sport related goals or CrossFit goals without like overdoing it.
Yeah. You said the key word. It's like while you were talking, my brain is going detraining. And you said
Right.
the magic word. That is the way you do it. So it may sound like a revolutionary idea, but I think things have changed now. We used to be satisfied with a period of detraining every year. We used to be satisfied with this rare fossilized form that doesn't exist anymore, which is called the off season. It's a mythical beast that used to exist. It doesn't anymore, right? But that concept of having an off season, like when I'm sure, you grew up around the same time I did, which is like, when you were a baby runner back in the day, right? They would talk about periodizing training, right? You have your off season in the winter, and you would build your season back up in the spring, and then you would do your races like, it was like the early fall marathon, and then, all this stuff. And that has really gone out the window. And so the reason why that's gone out the window is, again, it's not physiological. Our body still has that same need to train and detrain, right? We're designed to do that. But what has changed is our cultural sensibilities around what that means, right? So first of all, it's like there's races all year long now, right? Never used to be that way. But now it's like any given weekend, you can jump into a race, whether it's a triathlon, a bike race, anything. There's always something going on because it's become more of a business now. Like the number of races has just grown exponentially. So there's that one piece. But then also, we as a society have told ourselves that we need to look a certain way 12 months out of the year. And that informs a lot of and I would say, I would exclude, based on the people that I've worked with, I definitely think that the elites don't always fall into that trap. I think that they have depends on the sport, but I think that a lot of elite athletes don't mind kind of like putting on a few pounds when they're not, training and all these different things, because they know it's coming off. But I think that becomes a harder pill to swallow as you start going down in your athletic ability. So when you start going from elite down to age grouper and beginner and all those different things, I think that there's more pressure to on the person puts on themselves to maintain a certain aesthetic look based on their training, based on what they think, a triathlete or ex-athlete looks like. And I think that we're unwilling to sort of detrain because for us, that means weight gain or body composition changes or all these different things. And so the last point I would make about that is that as women, as we kind of go along in life, our actual needs for physical activity are going to change. And there's going to come, I'm a devotee of the Stacey Sims church of like, female athletes and what we should do and what we shouldn't do. And I think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that our training should change. And like a CrossFit class a week is probably good at 47. So you're probably fine, but it's that whole thing of like not going back to the same things that we used to do and letting our body kind of change. That's what it's supposed to. Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And you mentioned kind of body image along the way there. I know that you work with some high school students on this topic specifically, and I love that, first of all, because I think it's, especially our generation, like super relatable. I knew nothing about body image until I saw magazines, and then I just tried to look like that, and nobody taught me about how to eat even properly. I feel like even at school, nothing. So what do you tell high school students?
Yeah. So I do training sessions for high school. Like right now, the season is like cross country and track teams. And I love talking to high school students. I really do. What is sad, though, this is the part that kind of breaks my heart a little bit, is that their parents are my age, right? And their parents have so much diet culture talk in their homes, because these kids come in and they're talking about not wanting to eat certain things, or they're talking about like just these kind of, just the way they refer to certain things about bodies, or just their language. And you can tell it, like, and they'll tell you straight out, like, oh, my mom doesn't let me have that, or we don't have that in our house, or we don't eat gluten during the week, or it's like, yeah. So
like almond moms on TikTok. I don't know if you've seen that, but yes. I feel like that's the name that Gen Z is given, that kind of,
yeah.
I don't like that they've gendered it, because I think it's everybody, but definitely I can see that around me for sure in parenting.
For sure. So there's like a lot of like unraveling, and I really, what I do is that, like, I am a science nerd, so by profession and also just in general. So I try to stick to the science with these girls, and I say girls because I typically talk to women athletes, and it's like I do a lot of debunking. So I'll pull up studies that will say why someone who is not celiac shouldn't be on a gluten-free diet because and all the XYZ reasons. I'll pull up a study that says why they need to be getting more sleep because they're missing out on growth hormone if they're only sleeping 4 hours a night. Why
Right.
you just go down all the list of their kind of like bad habits, and anything they can throw at me of like, oh, but this, oh, but that. I try to just hit it with science every time. And also some of that is just like training people to look critically at social media. And I'm not, it's so hard. That's, I think, like the biggest thing, because they're really doing that comparison dance, all day, every day. Not just, it's easy to say like, don't look at celebrities, but they're looking at the other athletes like in their town or, in the rival high school. They're obsessed with like any athletes that like professional athletes that have like food blogs or cookbooks. And I'm just that, is a podcast. That's another podcast.
Right. Unto itself. Yeah.
To go down that rabbit hole. So there's a lot of unraveling there. And I just try to give them the best possible foundation because they are just getting thrown at them just, unbelievable amounts of just nonsense 24/7. And I feel like just giving them a foundation of like, here's what's real, here's what's not, and listen to your coach and do less. And, just a bunch of other kind of things. It's tough. They're under so much pressure, these kids, they really are.
Yeah. And do you think, you mentioned social media, but do you see anything changing in the body image particular, in that area in particular? Do you see something changing in a positive way?
I think it depends on the generation. I do. So it's, what goes around comes around kind of thing, And so I think that like we went through this like height of what I eat in a day videos and like all this kind of like,
Right. Yeah.
And like how many pictures of like the runners that would post their like run with their times, like from their Garmin, and then like a picture of them like hunched over into the camera so you could see their abs, that whole thing. Yeah, we went through a period of that, and we kind of moved away from it. And now I feel like the younger kids, there's a little bit of like, from what the girls have shown me anyway, like on TikTok, they're starting to kind of move back to the what I eat in a day sort of thing, or they're doing like these weird recipes. There was like this is a stupid one, but it was like I think this one was like a year ago. It was like fruit, I don't know if it was like fruit soup or natural cereal or something, and it was like water with like berries, and people like eating this for breakfast. Or it's way more insidious now because it comes with this like health halo. They'll be like, oh, drink this like lemon water to detox in the morning. And it's like, oh my God, my brain explodes of like all the bad science just in that one sentence, So like I think there's in some generations, I think like in our maybe like millennials and Gen X, I think it's a different kind of thing, but I feel like a lot of our bad habits have come back around a bit.
Oh gosh,
I
don't like to hear that, but
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. I watch, my daughter has like certain YouTubers that she loves to watch, right? And one of them did this review. They do review of like TikTok trends and stuff like that, So she's picked some pretty smart people who are like, they're reviewing the bad content instead of just straight watching it, which I prefer, obviously. But there was a trend that was like girl dinner.
Yes. Oh, so not good. Yeah. So not good.
Where it was like, yeah, just like a piece of cheese and some apples on a plate, and then like girl dinner, and like, what is happening?
Yeah, I know.
That kind of shocked me because I thought maybe we were eating now. Like I thought this is our time, we can eat now, but
we're not doing like straight up macro counting in everyone's face anymore. We're not like listing our cheat meals or that. I think that like that has kind of gone out of the vernacular, but there's still other like weirdo stuff about like, sometimes based on what celebrities are doing, sometimes just like weird recipes that become very culty, like it's just, yeah, it's a jungle out there. It really is.
Yeah. It's so pervasive. Like I feel I'm kind of mixed about it because I feel like it's not all terrible, but there are terrible things. So I try to like just look over my daughter's shoulder, like, what is it that you are watching?
Yeah, that's smart. That's really smart.
Get in the right TikTok algorithm,
Yeah.
Okay, let's go back. I found something on your Instagram I wanted to ask you about because this is, and we touched on it a little bit already, but like, you said we have no idea if the positive effects of exercise on mental health stand up through high intensity and volume. So you already talked about that like a little bit, but like, Can you unpack that?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we look at like if we look at the scientific literature on exercise, we have an exercise or the effects of exercise, let's say, we have a lot of understanding of what happens when people don't do any, right? We have plenty of robust studies
Right.
that tell us
Interesting. Yeah.
if you're a sedentary and you don't do any exercise, this is what's going to happen, right?
Mhm.
And then we have a lot of stuff in the middle that's like, if you do some kind of physical activity, you're going to have this outcome. And a lot of
Like
that
150 minutes a week.
that's right.
Right?
That is the golden number, 120
Yeah.
150, right? And that's where we see the mental health benefits. That's where we see the cardiovascular benefits. That's where we see a lot of stuff. Granted, I am not speaking of all the literature out there. I'm just saying, just generally speaking, there's a lot of emphasis on sort of a moderate amount of physical activity. A lot of what we know about what happens from exercise is based on that moderate amount of physical activity.
Yeah.
And so then we say we have mental health benefits at 20 minutes of walking, right? And then to say we have mental health benefits at like 3 hours of like, running, or 7 hours of bike riding, or, 2 hours of swimming. And it starts to, we're not sure, like the numbers don't really extrapolate that far out, and then you just have an influx of too many other factors that now dilute that message. That data does not, if you think about all the things that now enter into there, from a biological level, also from a psychological level, environmental, all the things that kind of, you just can't say that would ever hold up as we kind of move out.
Right.
Yeah. So my belief is that there is a way to do this that is healthful, right? And that allows you to engage in the sport that you love long term. So you can kind of avoid getting into trouble. It's just that not many of us are doing it. Some of us are doing it. Some of us are doing it. But on the amateur level, the age grouper level, when we don't have the benefit of a coach and a nutritionist and a team and someone who can kind of help keep us on the straight and narrow, the margin for error is quite big. I think there's a lot of people that could use a coach, could use a registered dietitian conversation, and they don't. And so we end up in this place where, we just kind of hit a wall. So to answer that question, it's like, if we don't know what's out there, we need support, right? So those people, we're just not getting it because we don't think we need it.
It's interesting. A couple months back, I interviewed Olympic rowers, our Canadian Olympic pair in the lightweight scull. And they were talking about their process of needing to, because they have to be a certain weight in the boat, right, for a competitive season. And like and when I heard like the amount of support that they had to like healthfully lose like 2 to 3 kilos, which is way under a lot of people's like weight loss goals,
yes.
right?
Yes.
And they do this year on year, and they have like a dietitian, and their coach supports them, and they have all of these, they know, and they're super educated about it. And I'm like, if that's what it takes for elite athletes, like the support, and like, should any of us even try? Like why not just do exercise and be happy?
Well, I mean, yes, that is the best question I've heard all day. Yeah, yes. But see, what you're saying is perfect for a community that doesn't attach cultural significance to what they look like, or what they kind of like, how they can maintain a certain body weight, or how they can not change at all. Like, people don't want to change as they age. They don't want to change as they detrain, right? And it's like, a body that doesn't change is a dead one, by the way. I love that, but that's true.
That's good.
Come on, right?
Yeah, that's great.
So, I mean, yeah, it would be great if people could just exercise and have fun and be like, wow, a day above dirt is a good day. This is great. I'm going to like ride my bike all day. Yes, it would be awesome if people would do that, but they don't, because it has to, we all have to have it mean something, and we all want the return for our investment, and we want to look a certain way because as a result of that. It's like, I feel bad always going back to that, but there is this kind of obsession in our culture with discipline, and whether you believe that discipline is what brings you a better body or a mind or a life or a job or financial, whatever, we are really obsessed with this one thing, and we kind of change it into, we make it the goal for everything. And it's unfortunate that we let that tell us a story about how that means we have to show up in the world. And
Mm-hmm.
instead of discipline being this really hardcore thing that we use to just push through everything, it is much more intelligent to be disciplined to the point where you are judicious about your expenditure of your energy and time and effort. It's like,
Oh, mhm.
that's discipline right there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's so interesting. So because my next question was going to be, what would be a good mindset? Because obviously what I just kind of like threw out there of like, let's all just be happy and do things. It's not, if someone's, when we're so hyper focused on being fit or looking a certain way, etc., we're not just going to come all the way back. So like, what does that look like? Do you think being judicious about like your time, your energy expenditure, your recovery, like what does that look like?
Yeah, it's going to be different for everybody. I think it's going to depend on sort of what you actually have time for and what you don't. I mean, like somebody who has a family with lots of kids and lots of commitments, that is going to have to look different than somebody who doesn't have other sort of things pulling on them. I think it's important for all of us to have purpose, right? I think purpose is really important. And I think there has to be a point, though, particularly as we get older, is where we have to decouple purpose with athletics. The reason why that is because after a certain point, if you push too hard on that athletic thing to be your purpose, you may find that the rest of your life doesn't work very well because some things may fall apart. You might not be physically well or mentally well or all these different things. So we've got to kind of diversify. We've got to separate those two things out. And again, this conversation would be different for an elite athlete than it would be an age grouper, right? But there's one piece that we both share, which is that sport is a wonderful part of our lives, right? But we have to find a place where it's not everything we are. It's a wonderful adjunct to our mental health care, but it is not our mental health care. Like we cannot have the sport take on responsibility of all that stuff. So I really believe in diversifying our interests. And the proof of that is that if you ask your daughter, your mother, your partner, your friends, what is the best thing about Sara? They don't care.
Right. They're not like
what your splits are. They do not care. They're not interested in like how fast you went and whatever. They're very proud of you and they love you, right? But they do not care. Your kids are like, she makes the best pancakes. Your mom is like, she always remembers to, send me a card for Mother's Day, whatever it is. So it's like remembering that there's a whole community of people that respect our athletic accomplishments, but they really just love who we are as people. So like we have to do that stuff, so being careful about what our purpose is and what our, what we want to do for athletic goals. Maybe it has to shift and it's okay to do less. And it doesn't mean you're less than, it just means that you're making more space for longevity. You want to be able to do it longer. You probably have to do less of it. Sometimes.
I love that. Thinking about it through the eyes of the people that love you. Like,
yes,
they're happy for me when I get a squat PR, but that's not like, and it would be disappointing, right? It's like, oh, Sarah's great because of her squat PR. Like, what? like,
what are you talking about? And it's the same thing for that body image stuff, by the way. It's like
our
parents and friends don't love us because we're a size 2. They do not care. They don't care. They really don't. They're just like, whatever, like, let's go see a movie. I don't know, we got to remember those things.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's great. And you did a study recently, or maybe it's not recent anymore, that looked at YouTube videos and ultra endurance athletes. I was just super curious about that. Like, what was your lens and what did you find with those YouTube videos?
Yeah. So it's actually pretty recent. It was just published a couple weeks ago, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So what I did was I had kind of a method for my madness here. What I wanted to do was sort of establish like what do we mean when we're talking about ultra endurance culture? Because a lot of times in my work, I write about how compelling the culture is, right? And how people who do Ironman, it's like, that's your whole life. People who do ultra marathons, like, that's your whole life. And it becomes very compelling, not only for people who've been doing it, but also for beginners. And it just really kind of sucks you in. And so I wanted to establish like, okay, if I'm a newbie or if I'm someone who's in the community, and what am I absorbed in? If I am watching YouTube videos, which is what people do to like learn about how to do something, right? We all fire up a YouTube video and it has become a real clearinghouse of ideas. So what would happen if I just did a YouTube search on different types of ultra endurance events and I watched like a bunch in each category? What kind of themes would I extract from that stuff? And once I extract those themes, like, do those hold up scientifically? Like, is that really what's happening? And so, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos and they were across a wide spectrum of ultra endurance sports. So it was triathlon for sure. There was ultra endurance cycling, people who do like channel swims and like really super long distance, like open water swimming, ultra marathon, of course. And there were also people who were, I guess, like ultra endurance cyclists that don't necessarily enter events, but sort of do, like, gosh, I can't remember her name. Is it, oh my goodness. Someone's going to kick me in the head. Lael Wilcox.
Oh, Lael Wilcox. She's been on the podcast before.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So she was in one of the videos. Rich Roll was in one of the videos. Tim Olson, lots of people that, we know. Also there was like ultra endurance kayaking, which I didn't really realize, but there's like a cross Atlantic, kayaking kind of thing. So anyway, there was a lot of different types of people. And so the themes that they talked about were, I mean, it sounds like, it makes it sound almost like not real. So like some of the things were just, it was constant reference to psychotic, crazy, right? Constant references to being out of their minds. You have to be crazy to do this. These people are psycho, this kind of stuff. Constant reference to like this kind of magical thinking stuff. Like, I just ran into the night and, took off my pants and ran all the way to like Half Moon Bay, like Dean Karnazes, like, the weight just fell off my body. It's like all this real, like, kind of romantic kind of language. There was also stuff about kind of like this, like weird sort of hero narrative, meaning like these events that people are competing in, particularly, I mean, all of them, but in that video that was particularly exemplary of this, it was a video with a very well-known ultramarathoner, a woman. And like the words there, the way people were talking about what she was doing was like, as if she was reorganizing atoms. I mean, it was like this unbelievable thing that she was doing. And it's like otherworldly and all these different things. And I'm like, this person is running like a lot of miles, but like this person is running on a course that somebody else kind of like put together. And like every few miles, someone comes and brings her pancakes. Like that's not, I mean, when we talk about a hero narrative, right? We're talking about like wars, right? We're talking about like things that happen in like crisis situations, people that go to, third world countries and do medical care, people who are under threat of bombs, people who are in a laboratory trying to cure cancer, people who are, in city centers trying to like change crime behavior. This person is running through, and right. It becomes a little, to me, obtuse in some ways, because it's just like, oh man. So then there's a couple of other themes in there too. When you start to look at it, the kind of ways that we talk about these things, they become very sort of, they become a little bit, it's like hyperbole is sort of like an understatement. And then,
yeah.
And then none of it really holds up scientifically, right? Like this whole thing about like the phrase that I heard so many times and I can't stand, like the pain cave, like, come on, give me a break. Like,
right.
It's just this whole thing of like, this mythology that we've created around the sport. Now, granted, I love the sport, always did. I'm like, if I had the ability to run those miles again, I would probably do it. I'm like that weirdo. Do you know what I mean? I don't, as much as I can critically sit back and be like, these sports have a lot of language around them that is not realistic, I'm still enamored by it. Like, I still want to do it. I still think it's cool. And so we have to really look at that, because there's not so many things in our lives that, even though we know they might not be the best thing for us, we do it anyway. And a lot of them are ones that are illegal.
That's interesting.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or legal, but with, bad effects.
Or like consequences, Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, and this paper, just to take it one step further, this paper goes into some social cultural background of like why we are obsessed with ultra endurance, even if you're not in the community. a lot of it has to do with things around, and I'm going to say this term, but not to be scared. It's like the concept is about neoliberalism, which is this idea that we have to self-service our own healthcare. And so, because like our healthcare system has failed us, and so we have to self-service our own healthcare. So we tend to sort of like put up on a pedestal these people who to us have achieved this like, very high level of health, right? And that's a whole thing. Again, that's a whole other podcast. But the problem with that is that breaks down very quickly when we realize that not all of these sports are healthy.
Yes.
So yeah.
That's so interesting you bring up, because I'm like, oh yeah, right. Sometimes even for myself, I find like people from the outside are perceiving my achievements in Ironman in a way that I'm not entirely comfortable with, but I don't want to take on every time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to
Yes.
challenge them, but it's
Yeah.
this like narrative around like the grit and determination and da, 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 da. Like, and I'm like, well, kinda, but like also it's a very like sport, and you kind of mentioned this, but like it's a very safe, almost like a safe place. Like someone is bringing you pancakes, like kind of sometimes literally but figuratively. Like you're training for a specific thing, you know how long it is, you know how to do the training, you have support, you do, and life isn't like that, right? And so like I almost see it as like, okay, that's this kind of like microcosm where I learned some great things for my later life, but
Right.
it's not like in and of itself does not feel to me like, and I a lot of people are gonna like shoot me for saying this, but, like does not feel like the greatest achievement,
Thank you
right?
for saying that.
Like
That's really
it's like there are a lot of other things in the world that are more unknown, that you can go explore. You have to make decisions on your feet all the time. It's like there's so many more. There's so many other things that I feel like we should almost appreciate at least equally as we do things like endurance sport and even what I do now, CrossFit. Like that we should put on the same pedestal almost. Like not to knock sport down, but like let's lift some other things up that are equally amazing achievements.
right. And not to take away like your incredible talent and who you are as a person, because to be able to achieve what you do, I mean, that really requires some outstanding personal characteristics. So let's definitely say that. But you still have those outstanding personal characteristics. If you were never an athlete, they would make you really amazing at something else.
Right. Oh, that's an interesting perspective. Yeah.
Because it just means you're awesome. And it means you're going to be awesome at different things, So if you're not so much an athlete anymore, but you're awesome at something else, like
Right.
you're still awesome. So,
Yeah, I love that. That's so interesting. Okay, what do you wish, let's, like for our audience, like what do you wish after all the studies that you've done, every endurance athlete, or even any athlete who's listening to this, maybe thinking, I might be a little obsessive, or maybe this could be a little more healthy regardless of their sport. Like, what do you wish they knew about mental health?
yeah. So I wish that people knew that you can support your mental health by sleeping enough, that you
Mhm.
could support your mental health by eating enough. And that when you hear a voice in your head that tells you need to push harder, or let's say eat less, or that you don't need that extra hour of sleep, like I wish that there was like a little warning flag that will fly up in people's heads. Because anytime we have thought processes that are antithetical to human success and like viability, that's where we really have to pay attention. So if you hear
Oh, I
yourself,
love that. Hmm.
yeah, if you hear yourself having thoughts that are not biologically correct, like in order for me to be successful here, I should take in less food. And that
Right. I should get up at 4 a.m. every day.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just also want to be clear here that like I'm speaking specifically to athletes, right? So if I was having this conversation with the general public, it may sound quite different, but the truth is that the majority of health information that athletes are listening to is crafted for a person that they are not. It's crafted for the general public, a person who needs different things than they do. Too bad that we don't realize that we need to filter that stuff out. So I wish that people would pay more attention to their thoughts around those things. Like I said, eat more, sleep more, and just really, really, really think about this community that we're in. After a while, becomes normal in terms of like volumes, intensities, races, schedules, training. You need a little bit of a check every now and then, a reality check, to step back a little bit and see, is this appropriate for me, who I am, or am I watching somebody on social media that's kind of like dictating what I should be doing? Or Strava. Oh God, we're training.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. Like
Yeah, for
watching other
sure.
people. Yeah.
For sure.
Um, Amazing. Well, Jill, thank you so much. This has been so fun and informative. And yeah, really appreciate you and all the work that you're doing, and would love to catch up again sometime as
Oh
well.
my gosh. Absolutely. I would love to come back. So many things to talk about. And always like more research happening. So for sure. It was great.
For decades, running shoes have been researched, tested, and designed for men. Brands have relied on the shrink it and pink it approach to sell male shoes to female customers. That's why we are so excited to be working with Hedas. Hedas designs athletic footwear for women that elevates performance, safety, and style. Hedas unlocks the science behind women's biomechanics through dedicated research, creates better shoes for women that support their longevity and performance, and establishes new design standards to promote transparency in a male-biased industry. Hedas have a lower ankle collar to reduce rubbing, a breathable mesh toe box to allow for ventilation and to allow for female toe shape, a special kind of plate in the midsole to keep tired legs going, a narrow heel cup to reduce heel slippage and take the pressure off our Achilles, and a rounded instep to create a snug fit. Hedas has 3 shoe models designed for different sessions: the Alma Cruise for long runs, the Alma Tempo for training days, and the Alma Speed for pushing the pace. I've personally been running in the Alma Cruise and I love them. It's the shoe I always wanted and never knew I needed. The fit is perfect in every way. You can get your own pair of Hedas at hedas.com and use the code Feisty20 for 20% off. That's Feisty20 at hedas.com, and it will all be in the show notes. As we head into summer, rest and recovery are critical for improving sports performance, reducing stress, and living a long and healthy life. We should all invest in better sleep. So, think about the thing you lay your head on for 8 hours a night. If it's not exactly right for you, it can lead to needless tossing and turning, or worse, have you waking up with an unrelenting kink in your neck. My new Lagoon pillow has helped me improve my sleep immensely by pairing me with the performance pillow that has everything I need. So I personally was matched with the Otter pillow. Shout out to Team Otter, which I love because it has a gentle cooling effect. And I was able to choose how much stuffing I wanted in it, which is super important to me because I'm doing a decent amount of CrossFit these days and my shoulders are kind of creaky. So having a pillow that is stuffed just to the right height keeps my neck and head in exactly the right position and comfortable for the entire night. And as of fall 2023, Lagoon launched their 100% mulberry silk pillowcases. It's cool to the touch, buttery soft, and great for your skin and hair. You've got to go check out this pillowcase if you want to feel great and look great every morning. Waking up for morning workouts has never felt better. I'm refreshed and pain-free thanks to my Lagoon pillow. To check it out for yourself, go to lagoonsleep.com/performance and take the 2-minute sleep quiz to find your perfect pillow match. And then use the code PERFORMANCE for 15% off your first purchase. That's code PERFORMANCE at lagoonsleep.com/performance, whole 15% off, and the link is in the show notes. You can just click through there.